What we're going to do now is we're going to look at one of the most important skills in teaching, which is the feedback we give children on their work, when they're working in a group, when they're doing a task in school. We call it formative feedback if it's feedback designed to enhance their learning. So as opposed to summative feedback, which might be how you evaluate at the end of a unit, formative feedback is designed to help kids learn. And it's very specific in that definition. It is literally modifying children's thinking or behavior to help them learn more. And I want you to remember, we practiced formative feedback when we did the integers unit. And you may recall, when you look at that bulletin board, we talked about kids making posters and then writing story problems. And we looked at their story problems, which weren't actually story problems, and we practiced doing formative feedback on starting with what was the strength, what was good about it. You know, your poster is good, your number line shows, your zero's in the right place. And as I read your story problem, what I need is some numbers, or I need it to end in a question. And we practiced giving formative feedback such that they could go back and they would know where to go to make the product better and, in essence, to learn more. That's formative feedback in its strictest definition. What I want us to do today, and it really highlights just how complex teaching is, because when I'm teaching, I am always thinking about how can I help children learn. But I'm also thinking with what I'm going to call my SEL lens. My antennae are up in terms of thinking, what's going on for this child? How are they feeling? How does the class treat different children in the room? What can I do to affect that? How are children feeling about their belief that they can do mathematics, or that by learning mathematics they can get better and better at it? How can I cultivate the beliefs, the attitudes, and the kind of respectful classroom community that I want? So when I'm thinking formative feedback, I'm thinking learning, but I'm also thinking of many of the dynamics that are embedded in my SEL lens, if you will. I'm looking at my classroom with my SEL lens. What I would like you to do is take a look at the castle wheels that you have on your desk. And I would like you to talk in your groups for a moment about when you're using formative feedback, which we practiced, how might you add to it to cultivate some of the social and emotional learning skills that are listed on this, what we call our castle wheel. It lists the dimensions, and then the subcategories kind of help you think, what could this look like in a classroom? And I'd like you to talk for a minute about, where do you see formative feedback intersecting with some of these social and emotional learning skills? And I'm going to give you a minute to read it and a minute to talk about it.
I also think self-awareness really applies to teamwork, because in math, kids are often put in little groups just like we are now. So just identifying, like, how are you participating in the group? Are you listening respectfully? Are you treating other people's opinions with respect? And are you contributing enough yourself?
Also, for responsible decision making, it kind of plays a role, because once the child has made a decision, the immediate feedback is kind of necessary for them to learn from their decision. So I think it also plays a role with that.
What about the whole issue of how children perceive one another? If your feedback is public, what would be some of the things you want to build into it?
Empathy.
Empathy, absolutely. Empathy. And if I'm doing public feedback, I'm also trying to shape what the class thinks of a student. So I'm going to take my tremendous power as a teacher and use it to try and boost a student who perhaps they don't think is good at school. And I've got to be really public, and I've got to be very, very specific. Otherwise, they'll just think I'm being nice, and actually what I'm being is honest. We're going to see that on the tape we're about to watch.
One of the students will be able to do it really fast, and the one student is struggling. He'll be like, just copy my answers. I have it all here. And then, so then the student who's copying is like, well, but I want to try it. So he's trying it, and then he gets it wrong. And the student is like, see, I told you to copy it. You should have copied it. So then, so he's like, oh.
So teaching them sort of the relationship skills and the social awareness. Teaching them that social awareness without being so explicit. It's not like I want to say to them, you might say it's easy, but it's hard for Johnny, so don't say that. But sort of just teaching them, if you're working on something and it's hard for you, and you hear a bunch of people in the class going, this is easy, I'm done, can we move on? How would that make you feel? So we keep those thoughts to ourselves. If you're done early, you can ask the teacher for more challenge. You can do, there's other things you can do besides sitting there going, this is easy, this is easy. So social awareness, definitely. And I think the formative feedback pulls into that too.
One of my students is really, really good at math, but he is so shy because he has like a speech problem, like he can't speak very clearly. So a lot of kids make fun of him. But then he's really, really good, and I'll ask him kind of quietly, be like, do you think you got this? Do you think you can explain it to somebody else? And he'll be like, I think so. And then I had him work one-on-one with me first, and so I can understand him a little clearer, and I help him work with his words. And this is like, being able to show me his work, and then I'm like, okay, why don't you go and help so-and-so? Because they speak the same language at home. So he can speak in Spanish to them because he feels more comfortable. And then I'll be like, oh, the next day, I'm like, why don't you try it with this person who speaks in English? Right. And then so it's working on so many more dimensions, But definitely with asking them to write like a harder problem. Like if you think it's so easy, why don't you try writing a harder problem, and then you can show it to the class. So it's empowering them in a way, and then it's also getting them to get quiet, right? So they're sitting there, how can I make this harder?
Right. If I thought this was so easy, what can I do to make it harder? Yeah, I like that.
Or you can totally be the whole, why don't you be the teacher now and come up with the problem? And then I'll have you demonstrate it to the class.
Okay, let me call you back. What do you see as some of the pertinent SEL skills that you want to be thinking about when you're giving kids formative feedback? Can you give me some examples of things you talked about in your groups? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we kind of talked about, just making sure that we're pointing out the positive things, because if you immediately go in and point out the things that are wrong, that's just going to cause students to just shut down completely.
Exactly.
And not want to share out, and it's going to not create that, that risk-taking environment for them.
And honest. I want to say, we start with a positive, but we also give them places to go. And when I give feedback to kids, they know I'm going to point out the things that are strong and the things that I want them to keep doing or put in their paper, but that I'm also going to give them paths almost always towards improvement, which is its own way of making it safe because they almost expect it from me.
I agree with Robin and what she was saying about making sure it's constructive feedback. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's very important because it contributes to their formation of identity. And you want to foster a positive environment where they have good feelings about, I'm not just bad at math, or I'm just good at math. It's, I work hard at math, and that's why I'm being successful.
You want to always give this idea. It is a work in progress. We are growing. It is a process. Okay, yes?
Okay, I think as a teacher too is just being able to relate with your students. Like I remember going to the dentist and I had a cavity, and I asked the dentist if he's ever had a cavity, and he's like, no, I have great teeth. And I was like, no, then I don't want you to touch my mouth. Like you can't relate to the pain that I'm about to go through. And I think it's the same thing with being a teacher, is telling them that, like I struggled with math and I got through it. And I think having, Miss Pies, like she's struggled, like she's been in my shoes, I think it helps them, a little bit more positive and seeing like, but she can still become a teacher. And so having that like positive reinforcement from someone that's teaching you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is empathy, is it not? And it's empathy. And I want to say, when I'm using it in the classroom, I'm also using it with some purpose. I was working with a group of middle school students just last week, and it was 2 boys who were very quick at math and 1 girl who really struggles with math. But she's really methodical. She goes at it, she really works hard at it, and I actually looked at her in the group, and the boys, they'd finished their stuff, and I looked at her and I smiled and I said, you and I are a lot alike in how we do math. I'm not quick at doing math. I take it really slowly, I chew on it, I try and really understand it. But the advantage of how we are is we tend to remember what we've learned because we went at it deeply, we took our time. So I'm not going to forget it. I didn't solve it in a flash of insight. I solved it by going at it step by step. We're a lot alike. And she got this huge smile because she was pretty convinced, and so were the boys in her group, that she wasn't any good at math. And it's like, no, actually, you and I are alike in how we go about math, and it's a good way to be for learning math. And I think that's a really good point. And it's one of the things we want to do. We want to help our students see that there's hope out there. I'm going to get better at math, and there's lots of ways to do that. Yeah. question.
Well, we're talking about, you know, the wheel and where formative feedback falls. And we talked a lot in our group, not just about as the teacher giving formative feedback, but monitoring it in your students. We talked a lot about how even if we're trying to be very constructive, that our students can be competitive, or they'll make a lot of comments about, well, this is so easy, why is it taking everyone so long? Or and so it sort of falls into this self-management and teaching them how to, you know, internalize. We talked about strategies, you know, saying, oh, well, why don't you sit here and work on a harder problem for us to try next? But even them saying it, even if you sort of cut it down quickly, just saying it aloud is going to affect the students that are still struggling. It's not, and I tell them it's not a competition. Math is not about how fast, but they love to be first. And I struggle with that with my fourth graders a lot.
One of the things that Carol Dweck and her colleagues who have researched growth mindset would say on that is one possible intervention is also to say, yeah, you know, if it's easy to do it quick, you strengthen the pathways in your mind and you get fluent at it. But I want to say when we're struggling with an idea, when we're trying to learn it or solve a problem that's hard for us, we actually learn more. So just like it's like I accept the challenge, I'm saying embrace the challenge, because actually when you are struggling with something harder, you are actually learning more. And in the long run, you're going to get smarter from learning more and embracing that uncertainty than practicing or doing quickly something that was easy. And it comes back to, I accept the challenge, because the challenge is going to actually have me learn more. What I want to do is I want to show you a videotape. It is a dramatization, but it captures such classroom realities. And we're going to watch that tape, and as we watch the tape, we're going to look at what are the feedback opportunities that the teacher has here. Now, I want to say in this dramatization, the teacher makes a big error, okay? And actually, one of the things that we have to do as teachers, it's like, you know, raise your hand if you've never made a big error in front of your class. It's like, that would not be me. I sometimes feel like I've made them all. The teacher asks a student who does not yet speak English to explain his reasoning in math. That's a bad idea. I mean, that's a setup. You can't do that. And yet the student has done something really smart in math. So what I want you to think is along many of the dimensions that you talked about, some of the feedback that I might use at that point is for the student's learning. Some of the feedback that I would think about using is to help the class in terms of how they think about that student and how competent they are in mathematics. And then some of the feedback might also be geared towards this, what we're going to call a growth mindset. Trying to teach children, look, intelligence changes. It is malleable. We have research and evidence and science that literally our brain changes when we learn. So, and we know when we put in effort, we learn. And I'm trying to cultivate that idea in students, because all of us get smarter with practice, with embracing challenge, with struggling, with persistence. And actually, in some ways, the deeper the struggle, the more we learn. So let's go ahead and watch this tape, immersion, and watch what happens in a classroom and explore what are the feedback opportunities for incorporating both learning into our goal and developing children's resilience in mathematics and creating the kind of respectful classroom community we want.
Listen up. So we're going to want to work all we get ours from the answer and the information in the story, okay? We're going to go ahead and test, factual test, and try this actus test. Test, your open up. So we're going to page, go to B. First on page 3.
¿Qué dijo? ¿A poco va a empezar el examen? No, es una práctica.
We're going to take notes from the story and we're going to turn it into a math problem and we're going to walk through it together, okay? So the boy ran 3 blocks. So everyone write 3 blocks.
I didn't even know. He looked like a stranger.
How long did it take him to run 3 blocks? Michelle?
6 minutes.
Very good, 6 minutes. All right, so then we take 3 blocks and 6 minutes,
¿Por qué
right?
niña corre con los bloques? ¿Qué? Sí, porque el niño corre con los bloques. No,
Okay, so the
corre 3
question's then
calles.
gonna go on to ask us, how long will it take him to run 20 blocks? What do we do? How many minutes is that per block?
8 minutes.
Try and remember to raise your hand if you want to answer, okay? No, it's not 8 minutes. Michelle.
18 minutes?
Nope, not 18 minutes. Yes, Enrique?
40?
40, yeah, very good. How'd you get 40?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, 40 is the right answer. How did you get it?
I forgot.
You forgot. Okay. Does anyone know how we get 40? Yes, Moises. Yep, that's right. Very good. Great. Can you tell us how you got that?
40?
Yep, very good. But can you explain to the class what you did here, how you got that?
40?
Okay, all right, you guys, settle down.
That is so dumb.
Joe, do you want to lose your recess?
No.
Okay, then.
There's all sorts of things you can pay attention to in this tape, and probably the thing that we empathize with maybe the most is when you say something in class like, can you explain your answer, to a child who can't explain it in English, and you think, oh, that was a mistake. And our own resilience and our own self-awareness and ability to regulate after that, it's like, yeah, it was a mistake. How might I recover? And how might I recover in ways that are going to help my kids, because that was a serious mistake. But I also want to say, for our purposes today, I really want to look at what feedback opportunities she had, because if she got to stop the tape and do it over again, she had some great feedback opportunities. And in the world of, if I just could do that one more time, I'd do it this way, we're gonna be that for her. What are her feedback opportunities, given she probably can't tell Moises exactly what he's done well, but what can she do by way of feedback, by way of shaping her classroom community, and by way perhaps of fostering a growth mindset? I'd like you to talk in your table groups for just a few minutes, and then I'd like to hear out some possibilities.
She could have taken up his work and shown the class how he had worked it out, and then put her own words to it, and been able to use the theory, or whatever you want to say, that he had used to work it out, and explain to other students, and not only explain the solution, but also, which so often happens, explain that just because students aren't sharing their answers and aren't able to articulate, it doesn't mean that they don't understand what's happening and aren't fully understanding the concepts. So
I also believe she could have validated his correct answer in a better way.
Yeah.
To sort of lead him and give him the empathy he needed to know that his sharing wasn't thought of as he's repeating the answer in English, but that he's also getting the concept, like you said, by sharing his work in, her words rather than his, since he couldn't articulate them. But he could clearly show them in mathematical articulation.
Yeah.
He could go up there and write it on the board, and the teacher could have explained it as he wrote it.
That would have been
And then that way the class would see not only does he get it, he's actually found a way to do it without using the model that she wrote, which is using words that he obviously can't understand.
As a teacher, you can draw this on the board and try to pull out in their own words how they would explain it. So that way they have their own, that way all the students could understand, because it would be in kid language or
kid-friendly language.
Even having him do it in Spanish. I mean,
if that was the case, have their little translator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even if he didn't have a translator, just him being allowed to express himself in his native language would have at least given him the validation he deserved and needed to prove not only is he self-reliant, he's able to communicate his awareness of the problem.
That's a good idea. I like that.
I really think it's just a matter of using his work as an example, because he obviously showed it on his paper. And instead of just asking him repeatedly to explain it, take the initiative to write what he wrote on the board, and then ask the class if anyone else showed it in a different way. And maybe it be his voice explain how he got it.
Being able to break it down so he knows how to explain it, because if you just say explain it to the class, that's kind of like the iceberg picture where it's too big and overwhelming, and well, how do I explain it to the class? I don't know. But if she writes it down, okay, you wrote this first, why did you write this part? This, and help him explain it.
Let me call you back if I may. And as we talk about this, I'm going to ask you to kind of think of 3 goals that I might have with my feedback. The first is the classic goal for formative feedback, that I'm going to further the class or Moises' learning. But I also want us to think in terms of respectful community. And how can I create a more respectful community? Because what's going on in that classroom is not very respectful. And how can I use my tremendous power as a teacher to build up how the students perceive Moises?
I felt his pain as they're laughing at him, and he looks down and it's like, you got it right, and you have the process to do it, and you were able to do it without understanding the language,
which is hugely difficult, a far more cognitively demanding task than if you did. And he did it. Yeah.
And as a teacher, I mean, we have the power to really highlight that and be like, wow Moises, you really did it. Like, class, yes. Like look at what he did, and maybe put his work up on the board and be like, look how he got there.
Exactly. And I want to say a sociologist would call that a status treatment. And what you're doing with a status treatment is you're taking your tremendous power as a teacher, and never doubt for a minute that you are by far the most powerful person in the classroom, and they see one of your roles as evaluator. We have a gazillion roles when we teach, but one of them that students know well is we evaluate. So when you say, Moises, you did it exactly right, and you represented it here on your paper in a way that I could actually use to teach other people in this class. Let's take this and work with it. I am raising his status in the class, and I'm saying he's good at math, he solved it using a great strategy, and you know what, guys? You could learn from him. And my purpose in that is really quite specific. I want, when Moises asks for help, I want them to give it to him. When Moises is in a group, I want them to talk to him. That's one of the best ways he will learn English. I want what we call equal status interaction, because it will further his learning, and quite frankly, look at what he knows that Enrique needs to know. It will further their learning. What else, Ori?
I think it would also be nice if she commended that he showed his work, because that's emphasizing and complimenting his hard work, in contrast to the other kid who that role would typically be like taking a lucky guess if he threw out an answer. And in this case, it wasn't even that child's lucky guess, because he was reading off someone else's paper. So really praising the process instead of the end result.
We want to look at the process where he put in effort, he was meticulous, he showed his work, he showed how he thought about it. And yes, that is something I absolutely want to give feedback to, and probably public again, because I want the class to start doing what he's doing. I want them to put in effort. I want them to be meticulous. And I might even add to it, one of the things I'm trying to accomplish with the growth mindset is just, and I can't beat the proverbial dead horse on this, but I want to say, when you put in effort like that, we get smarter. When we put in effort like that, our mind grows.
So I felt like that the teacher missed a real opportunity when the student said that Moises was stupid. I felt like that was an opportunity for her to actually take his work and show it to the class. Maybe if he can't articulate it, she could, because she could clearly see how he got it right. Exactly. And she could have made that, like you said, she holds all the power in the classroom. And so she not only took away value from him, she also made it almost acceptable that what was going on in the classroom around him. So he might not have understood the words, but he understood the intent.
Yeah, and I will say, again, this is a dramatization, but I will say in her defense, I think she shows she's upset by how the class reacts, but she doesn't know what to do about it. And one of the things that I'm trying to give you in this class is there are specific things we can do about it. And you have identified them. The first thing to address this problem is to publicly say what's right about what he did, perhaps to model it on the board. I do want to say, by way of formative feedback for learning, I've got a little dilemma here. He says 1/2 is equal to 3 is equal to 6. And I don't want to model that on the board because it's not quite right, and I might fudge a little bit. I might put the 3 numbers and add connective words. 3 is 1/2 of 6, so that I'm modeling for my class but still honoring clearly the thinking behind it. It is not the time to point out, Moises, this actually is wrong in terms of arithmetic because these things aren't equal. Not the time. But I can model for him a way of writing it that would be mathematically correct, while highlighting what really matters, which is he solved it with elegant simplicity, something mathematicians really admire.